If you are caught with 5 grams of crack cocaine and someone else is caught with 500 grams of cocaine, do you expect that you all should get the same amount of time if you all, say, have the same record, if you all, are charged with the same thing? In other words, should the person with 5 grams of crack get more time than the person with 500 grams of powder cocaine? Or should it be the same? Stay tuned, because we're going to answer that question.
That Corbin and Corbin legal team fighting for the rights of the people. That father-daughter team investing in the youth when the system ain't treating them equal. Providing truth for our people, we able to reach them. So anytime you get accused for a crime and Lord knows you ain't do it, we here to get you through it. Exemplifying prudence and glorifying God, making sure you're compensated for other people's doings. Our vision is to be one of the best. We're small enough to focus on your matter throughout the neighborhoods of Dallas. Working constantly and making sure your rights are protected. A firm team of lawyers, aggressive, effective. A team that has your back in the courtroom. 2 well-spoken black lawyers in the courtroom. Investing time and resources when it's evident that you were treated wrong. Now you walking out of Dallas courtroom with a settlement. Corbin and Corbett, the father-daughter legal tag team that has your back in the courtroom. Our purpose is simple: to obtain a favorable outcome for each client and glorify Christ in all we do. Our vision is to be one of the best and most...
Hello, Rebels. This is Attorney Augustus Corbett, and I'm also known as the Minister of Justice. And with me, sitting shotgun, as always, is
Attorney Chloe Corbett, a.k.a. the Duchess of Justice.
And together we are the Defiant Lawyers. We provide legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to provide you the information you need to defy an unjust legal system. If you're not a subscriber, hurry up. What are you waiting on? We're growing. We're growing. You should be a part of this community. You should be a part of this family so that you can get all the legal information we bring on a weekly basis, again, to empower you to defy this unjust legal system. All right, we have an exciting show lined up for you all today, and don't even let me hold back because we have a special guest with us. We have Jeremy Gordon, attorney Jeremy Gordon. Now, Jeremy is looking right there like he might be locked. I don't know, Jeremy, or I think you are, because otherwise he is locked into the camera. No, I believe he's locked. So we gotta get him back on here in just a minute. But in the meantime, Chloe and I will proceed until Jeremy gets back on with us. I don't know what happened, but we're looking forward to talking with Jeremy, Chloe, because Jeremy has a unique practice in that he works exclusively in the federal court system as a federal criminal defense attorney.
Yeah. And he was a former prosecutor, so he has both the prosecutorial perspective. Now he's a federal litigator, defending people in federal court. So we're so excited to have him on. And the reason why we wanted to have him on this show is because of his knowledge about what is going on with Congress, with the unequal sentencing when a person possesses crack cocaine versus powder cocaine, and all of the knowledge that he brings with that. So I'm so excited to get into it. I hope he's able to get back up here because we want to hear from him.
That is absolutely right. So we're waiting for him to dial back in.
But while we wait, Daddy,
go ahead.
While we wait,
yeah,
I have to tell the people how excited I am about future Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yes.
I am so excited. I am so excited and happy that we finally have the first Black Supreme Court justice on the United States Supreme Court. After 233 years in this country's history, 115 appointments, we finally have a Black woman on that court, on the highest court in the land. And when I found out this information, I was in court. I was in a court with a white judge, white prosecutors, white defense attorneys. I was the only Black attorney and the only Black female attorney in the courtroom. And I was waiting for my turn. I was scrolling through the phone and I got a text message of her confirmation. And I must say, I put my shoulders back. I had my my head held higher. I was walking with a pep in my step in that courtroom. It was just so amazing to hear that news while of her confirmation while I'm in the courtroom myself. It was just an extraordinary moment. I'm just so happy. This moment means so much to so many people across this country. So it is huge. It's huge, huge, huge. What are your thoughts about it?
Well, we're actually going to. I got a pretty a lot to say about it. Actually, I can only imagine how excited you are about it as an African American attorney. So, and we've sort of covered it twice already, but since she has actually been confirmed, we got to celebrate again. All right, hold on just a moment because Jeremy is trying to get back on. So let's see here. So go ahead and talk while I get him back on.
Well, I mean, her appointment and confirmation just comes on the back of so many Americans, specifically Black Americans, that have contributed to the society and the legal field, and it is. I mean, it's just something that I've been waiting for even before we had Barack Obama as the first Black president of this country. We spoke often about how we need a Black woman on the Supreme Court. We've had two Black men. We had the first Black man, Thurgood Marshall, which my law school, my alma mater, Thurgood Marshall School of Law, is named after.
Jeremy is on the line, by the way, so he's back, Chloe.
Oh, perfect.
But go ahead and finish your thought.
We've had another Black male Supreme Court justice, and now we finally have a Black female Supreme Court justice. So this is just a huge moment in time. It's extraordinary, and I am still on a high after hearing the news of her confirmation.
Very good. Thank you for sharing those comments. We're going to say a little bit more about Justice Jackson at the end of the broadcast, but we're going to move on with Attorney Jeremy Gordon. We are so, in fact, before we go further, Chloe, since you said that about Justice Jackson, we are going to dedicate the show to every person. I just wrote out a little statement. We're going to dedicate today's show to every person who made possible the historic appointment of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. People such as, and I went way back, people such as Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Dr. King, and all the civil rights movement folks. Fannie Lou Hamer, one of my favorite women, Black women from the civil rights era. Former President Barack Obama, who nominated her for the D.C. Circuit. Of course, President Joe Biden for nominating her to this court. VP Kamala Harris. Wasn't that something, seeing a Black female vice president gavel in the confirmation vote for Justice Jackson? And of course, many, many, many others who contributed to seeing this historic day. So this show is dedicated to all of those folks. All right. Okay, now to Mr. Gordon, Jeremy Gordon. Attorney Gordon is a federal criminal defense lawyer with a lengthy record of successful acquittals in appeals in federal cases. He is a former chief prosecutor of Harris County, which is Houston, Texas. 10 years of experience so far, And he's a relatively young man, so he'll be there many more years in the federal court system. And he's a passionate advocate for defendants and families. So we are just delighted and honored to have Jeremy with us today. And we asked him to come up here because of this issue of the disparity between crack versus powder cocaine in federal sentencing. A little bit of background on that before we actually have Jeremy start talking to us about it. This whole problem with crack cocaine and the disparity actually started back in 1986 when Congress passed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, signed into law by President, I think, George Bush Sr., I think. Don't hold me to that. I believe so. And that particular law mandated that crack cocaine sentencing be 100 to 1 to powder cocaine. And so if a person had, as I said in the opening, if a person had 5 grams of crack, someone else had 500 grams of powder cocaine, they would get the same amount of time, which is just on its face unfair. And the problem with that is most of the people who were convicted, prosecuted, and convicted of crack cocaine are black people, overwhelmingly, whereas most of the powder cocaine users are whites. Now, Congress addressed this problem back in 2010 when it enacted the Fair Sentencing Act, which reduced it from 101 to 18 to 1. And also made it retroactive. So that was a huge step. Pardon me, it became retroactive with the First Step Act of 2018, which was passed just a few years ago. And so that brings us to the Equal Act of 2021. And that's the reason why we've asked Attorney Gordon to join us today, given his very broad experience in the federal court system. Jeremy, thank you for joining us and welcome to the Defiant Lawyers broadcast. Jeremy, I think you're mute. And I think as soon as he unmuted himself, he froze up again, Chloe. But that's okay. Like he's going to call back in and we're going to get him back on. Okay, yep. We want to hear from him. So just the history that I just gave you about the disparity with crack versus powder cocaine, what do you say about that?
I mean, it goes back. We briefly spoke about this in another video about how crack cocaine was introduced into the black community by the United States government. That's been verified. And the fact that in the 1980s, after the government introduced crack cocaine into our communities, that's when this big war on drugs started, and this sentencing disparity began, in which the people who mostly used crack cocaine were African American, as you said, received these harsh sentences. And it lines up with the minimum federal sentencings that came, the 100 to 1 sentence disparity that came for people who were users of crack cocaine versus powder cocaine. It just goes to show the racial disparity that is once again evident in our justice system. And when in 2010, when the Fair Sentencing Act came, it was actually a bipartisan act. Both sides, both Democrats and Republicans, they were both for the passage of the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010. So I think it goes to show that this country has recognized that this unfair treatment between crack cocaine and powder cocaine was not equal, and that it needed to be addressed.
All right, very good. And we got Jeremy back on the line. Jeremy, once again, thank you for joining us, and we're gonna let him get going so we can make sure we get his comments today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. What's interesting about the the disparity between crack cocaine and cocaine is that a gram is a sugar packet. When we think about the difference between crack cocaine and cocaine, it's so many more grams of powder that are required to trigger that mandatory minimum. And the judges are without almost any remedy to fix that mandatory. Like there might be a situation where
Jeremy,
if
I
it's
hate to
yes,
I hate to interrupt, but it's really spotty. We're getting probably every fifth word of what you're saying. Let me ask you: do you have an Ethernet connection?
I do not. How about? I mean, I can maybe try to fix this in my house and maybe come back like next week or in a couple something like just you know.
Well, that'd be great. However, whatever's convenient for you, we would like for the folks to hear from you. Um, that'd be great. Whenever you get situated, just call us back. We'll go to some of the other stuff that we're doing, and we'll come back.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
There-
No, thank you. Absolutely. Okay, Chloe. Um, so let's hold our comments about the crack disparity until um, until Jeremy gets back on. All right. So we're going to move to the next topic. We're going to stay within this topic of the federal judiciary, in other words, the federal court system. And what I'd like to do is start with federal judges, black federal judges. Now, the first black federal judge, Chloe, was Judge William Hasty. Now, let me just make sure that everyone is hearing me well. Just make sure everybody's hearing me, and they are. All right. So, Judge Hasty was the very first black federal judge. And last week, we talked about the first black female federal judge, Judge Constance Baker Motley, which Justice Ketanji Jackson has mentioned several times already because she is a mentee, or she admired Justice Motley, Baker Motley. She's died now, unfortunately, but she looked up to her. And let me just say this before I get your comments on these first blacks to serve on the federal judiciary. The federal court system is extremely important to black America. Very, 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 very important to black America. Now, some of you may not understand sort of the difference, but, our country is a republic. It's made up of 50 states, and then there is the federal government. And a lot of the criminal laws and criminal prosecutions occur within the 50 states. But the federal court, the federal government also have laws, and if you violate those laws, then that is a federal violation, and then there's the federal court system that will prosecute such people. Now, before we talk about prosecution, when it comes to civil rights, the federal court system has been a lifesaver for black Americans. Because in the state courts, a lot of times we dealt with racist judges, racist juries, and they would not do the right thing most often for black Americans. We had to always take our case into the federal court system. It was in the federal court system that Brown v. Board of Education was handed down, so many other laws that, so many other cases that impacted black America. The Gideon case, where if you are an indigent, the state has to appoint you a lawyer so many of these cases were handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court hasn't always been that way. It hasn't always been friendly toward Black Americans, because there was the Dred Scott decision. There was also the Plessy v. Ferguson decision, and there are others. But for the most part, we have been able to get justice on the federal level when we couldn't get it on the state level.
Yeah. And just to break it down further for the rebels, the difference between federal court and state court. So when you think of a divorce or custody, or if you have a contract and someone breaks the contract, that's going to be heard in state court in a lower court level. What we're talking about today is federal court, which is where there are lawsuits that concern a federal question like racism, racial discrimination, or there's a lawsuit between diverse parties. So one party lives in Texas and one party lives in Montana, and the damages is higher than 75,000. So in those type of lawsuits, they're going to be heard in federal court, and the federal court is higher um, than state court or district courts, etc. So we're specifically talking about federal court today, which is completely different. And what my dad just said is so important. When someone is discriminated on the basis of race, or you go into a bank and you're discriminated because you're black, or you're not lended a car because you're black, those types of cases are more than likely going to be heard in federal court 9 times out of 10. And so it's the federal courts that have made these big, set this all of this precedent in saying, racial discrimination is wrong. You can't, it's a violation of the Constitution, etc. So that's what we're talking about today.
Yes, exactly. So the federal court system is just really, really, really important. Now, this issue of crack cocaine versus powder cocaine disparity, that's a federal issue. It was, again, as I said earlier, based on a law passed by Congress back during the crack epidemic. Chloe, you weren't even born when that was really, really going on. That sort of started really in the 80s. And in fact, somebody corrected me, my wife, as always, and said it wasn't Bush who signed it into law. It was Ronald Reagan. Yeah, that was back in the 80s. Crack was having a tremendous impact in the Black community. And there were a lot of Black folks who agreed with some of these laws because, again, the crack epidemic was affecting the Black community disproportionately. And now, as you pointed out, it was the federal government that introduced drugs to the Black community. So we can't, just give the federal government an A because they have also been racist toward Blacks. But the federal judiciary has been the place that we have gotten a lot of our rights protected. Now, let's say hello to some of the rebels who have joined us. Love what Brandon Demons said. He said, next in line is Justice Chloe Corbett. All right. I love that.
Thanks,
love that.
Brandon.
I agree. I come in agreement with that. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Brandon. And the Reverend Jervy Hopper says Black history is so paramount to the culture. You better believe it, Reverend Harper. Thank you for that comment, and thank you for being with us, one of our faithful viewers and commenters, and we're just so happy to have him with us because, again, as a man of the cloth, I really appreciate his perspective and the perspective of all of you. So please continue to comment and engage. That's really what makes this show so fun and interesting. And when there's a lot of engagement, we're trying to figure out a way where you can actually call in so that we can have those call-in conversations. But until then, we're going to do it via the chat. So let me once again put up here the Trailblazers. Judge William Hasty Jr., first Black American federal judge, the very first one. And then Judge Constance Baker Motley. Now, some more famous federal judges. First, of course, Justice Thurgood Marshall. Now, let me just ensure we got sound. Justice Marshall, we do have sound, I can tell that. So there's Justice Marshall. He was the first African-American SCOTUS justice or Supreme Court justice, the very first one. And he also had a tremendous civil rights practice. Most people, Chloe, know that he was the lead attorney on the Brown v. Board of Education case, but he did so much other work as well leading up to that case. And of course, you went to a school that is named after him, so I know you got things to say about Justice Marshall.
Yeah, I read his book when I was younger. I read his biography when I was younger, before I even decided that I wanted to be a lawyer. And it was just really inspirational, really inspiring, hearing about his story and how he used his legal training to argue one of the biggest cases in our history, and that opened the door to ending racial segregation. And then just, the icing on the top, being able to go to a law school named after him was amazing. Thurgood Marshall School of Law. I'm so happy that I was able to go there. They really put a premium on racial justice, being one of the most diverse law schools in the country, and really focusing on advocacy and using our legal training for good. So, I mean, he's just amazing. I also want to talk about Judge Constance Baker Motley. I don't know when we're going to talk about it in the program, but whenever we have a chance, I would love to talk about her.
No, please go ahead. Let me go
Yeah.
back to that graphic. Please go ahead.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Constance Baker Motley. As you see, she was the first Black female federal judge. And what a lot of people don't know is that she wrote the original complaint for the Brown versus Board of Education landmark case that ended racial segregation in American schools. But just a little bit more about her. She served as a judge on the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. She was a key strategist of the Civil Rights Movement. She was a state senator, and she also had a role in the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund as a staff attorney in 1946. And she was the first Black woman to argue in front of the Supreme Court. I mean, just think about that, guys. The first Black woman ever in the mid 1900s to argue in front of the Supreme Court, and she argued 10 landmark civil rights cases in front of the Supreme Court. I mean, she was just extraordinary.
And won 9 of them.
And won 9 of them.
Yes.
So not only did she didn't argue them, she won a majority of them. And she's just widely acknowledged as a major figure in the civil rights movement, especially its legal battles. I have to give the props to the NAACP for hiring her as a civil rights lawyer, being a Black woman, because back then, Black female attorneys were even more scarce than we are now. Now we're only 2% of licensed attorneys in the United States. But she was, as I said before, she was the first African-American woman ever to argue a case before the United States Supreme Court. In Meredith v. Fair, she won James Meredith's effort to be the first Black student to attend the University of Mississippi in 1962. Huge.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I remember James Meredith desegregating the University of Mississippi. I remember that. I don't remember it, but I'm aware of it. But I didn't know his attorney was Judge Constance Motley.
Huge.
So
and then she was nominated.
Go ahead.
And then she was nominated by President LBJ Lyndon B. Johnson in 1966 to the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. At the time, her confirmation process was delayed by 7 months by a senator. This senator used his influence to disrupt her nomination, went as far as accusing her of being a member of the Communist Party, very reminiscent of what they tried to do to Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson as well. But despite all of that, she was confirmed by the United States Senate in 1966, in which she became the first Black female federal judge. And she was chief judge from 1982 to 1986. So we have to give it up for Judge Constance Baker Motley.
Absolutely.
Huge, huge, huge.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all that with us. We talked about her briefly last week, and knowing even more about her, the first Black female federal judge. I tell you, it's we need to know that. I want African American women to see themselves in these high positions. I want Black women to say, I can do that. And another, little thing about Justice Ketanji Jackson is she sat there, and this may be a small observation, but it stood out to me. She sat there with natural hair.
Yeah.
Right? Natural hair. I mean, with braids. Okay. All right. So other famous judges we put up here just a second ago, Justice Thurgood Marshall. Then there's another favorite federal judge of mine, Judge Leon Higginbotham. He was a judge on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and he was a giant. I mean, a giant in legal circles. And I wanted to acknowledge him. And then there's Justice Clarence Thomas. I am not going to disparage him. I disagree strongly with so much of what he does, just so much. But we have an ethical obligation as attorneys to be respectful of judges. But I have strong disagreements with Justice Clarence Thomas. And some of the things that he does. In fact, we're going to talk about him. I guess now's as good a time as ever. Let's talk about some of the controversy that his wife has been embroiled in over the past few weeks. His wife, her name is Virginia. She and Justice Thomas have been married a long time. They are very committed conservative Republicans, and she is all up into this thing. And they're both very strong supporters of Donald Trump. And the controversy has been the fact that she, Chloe, was involved in the January 6th attempt to overthrow the election, the failed insurrection, however you want to say it. And I mean, she was knee deep in that. In fact, it has come out through this investigation that all right, thank you. Sorry about that. So these are text messages that Jenny Thomas wrote to Mark Meadows, the chief of staff for Donald Trump at that time. And I quote her, "Help this great president stand firm, Mark. You are the leader with him who is standing for America's constitutional governance at the precipice. The majority knows Biden and the left is attempting the greatest heist of our history." She wrote that. She texts, quote, "We are living through what feels like the end of America. Most of us are disgusted with the VP, Mike Pence at that time, and are in a listening mode to see where to fight with our teams. Those who attacked the Capitol are not representative of our great teams of patriots for DJT. Amazing times. The end of liberty." Well, I disagree with her when she says that those who attacked the Capitol are not representative of our great teams. That's flat out untrue. That's flat out untrue. And when she says that she was disgusted with Mike Pence for not doing his constitutional, doing his constitutional duty and certifying that election, that tells you right there that the folks who physically, violently stormed the Capitol were absolutely a part of all that she was trying to do. And she also admitted a couple of weeks ago that she was, in fact, at that protest on January 6th. Now, she says she left before it turned violent, but she was there. And there is some evidence that she also played a part in getting people to that rally. So I don't know what she's talking about there when she says the folks who actually stormed the Capitol are not representative of her teams. But the big problem is not that she says those things or texts those things necessarily, because she's an American. She has a right to free speech. She can say what she want to say. The problem is the fact that her husband is on the U.S. Supreme Court hearing cases about January 6th. And there's one case in particular that had to do with whether or not Trump had to turn over White House records. And Justice Thomas, was the lone and only dissenter in that case. Everybody else said, yes, Trump has to turn over those records. He said no. And he's married to the woman who's out here contacting the chief of staff, out here being a strong activist. If she wasn't married to him, that's one thing. But the fact that she's married to him and he's sitting on the court that's deciding these issues, that's a problem. That's a huge problem. And so people have asked, have said that Justice Thomas should recuse himself from every case having to do with January 6th. What do you think, Chloe?
He definitely should recuse himself. His wife, Jenny Thomas, she's been a big conservative activist for years and years and years. Like you said before, they are both supporters of the Republican conservative wing of the party. But what's different now is that she is actively involved in attempting to overthrow the government and asking then Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to do something to keep Trump in office. So not only before, when she was just using her First Amendment rights to protest and participate in activism or etc. for conservative values, but right now she is a part of the story and she is an active member in asking a chief of staff to try to overthrow the government. So it's different. It goes beyond just mere activism. Now she is a key component and needs to be investigated. And so Justice Thomas definitely should have recused himself anytime any one of these cases related to the election results, overthrowing the government, etc., came before the Supreme Court. And he gets a huge side eye from me for not recusing himself. But I'll leave it at that, since he is he is a justice. But he does get a huge side eye for not doing that.
As he should, right? As he should. Now, there has been some discussion amongst lawyers and judges, politicians, etc., about the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't have ethics rules like the rest of us lawyers. Now, your mom and I discussed that, and I don't know if I completely agree with that there are no ethics rules for the U.S. Supreme Court. I do know that they serve for life based upon good behavior. The only way to get rid of them is via an impeachment, okay? So they are definitely an autonomous body for the most part. The way the frame was set up, the government, they are sort of interdependent in that, the federal court system needs Congress to approve, funding. But then on the other hand, the U.S. Supreme Court can strike down laws that Congress pass. So they kind of balance each other out in the sense of one being able to do something to the other can't do to the other, and so on. But ethics rules, I heard a law professor say that there are model rules that were promulgated by, or at least written by, the American Bar Association that at least tangentially are there at least for guidance for the U.S. Supreme Court. So to say that there are absolutely no ethics rules whatsoever, I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Well, to me, it doesn't make sense why, you and me, that we're subject to ethics rules. We're subject to ABA model rules, American Bar Association, and then we're subject to Texas's local rules. And so if we, as practicing attorneys, are subject to ethics rules, why are the Supreme Court justices not subject to ethics rules as well? They're making decisions that affect the entire country. They are justices on the highest court in the land. I believe that they should have their own set of ethics rules that will contemplate something like this happening, where you have a sitting Supreme Court justice whose wife is texting the former chief of staff to try to overthrow the government and the people's decision in the election. So I think that if they need to have a specific outline ethics rules that will address behavior like this. And I kind of understand why. The framers and hundreds of years ago, they wanted the Supreme Court to kind of sit separately, to be seen as kind of a moral compass ground for the entire country. But they should be subject to ethics rules just like everyday attorneys and judges are as well. And in fact, public opinion about the Supreme Court has dropped a lot. In a Gallup poll from 2019, the Supreme Court had a 68% approval rating. It has dropped to 40% in 2021. So that just goes to show some of the kind of lack of faith that the American public has in the Supreme Court. And I feel that if the Supreme Court adopts ethics rules, it might bring some more favor back in the Supreme Court's side of things.
That is a great, great point. The public's trust and confidence in the U.S. Supreme Court is eroding, and I believe it's because the Supreme Court is openly political. They deny that. Chief Justice John Roberts hates hearing that, and he refutes it. But what else can you think? I mean, right now we have 6 very conservative justices on the court, right? One is retiring. Justice Jackson will replace him, Stephen Breyer. And you can almost predict exactly where the court is headed and what they're going to rule on cases, okay? And that's because, unfortunately, the justices are absolutely political. If not, Justice Thomas would, in fact, recuse himself. I mean, that's just the obvious thing to do here when your wife is a political activist, and cases that she is out there or situations she's out there involved in comes before your court that you sit on, you should say, I'm going to sit this one out because my wife is directly involved in this matter. And you don't want to, even give the appearance of being partial, biased, prejudiced in some way. So he absolutely should recuse himself, and for the reason you said, because, everyone else who has a bar card who is a practicing attorney, definitely got to live by those ethics rules. All right, your mom has said SCOTUS should definitely have ethics rules that they practice. Absolutely.
Yep.
I think there's sound agreement on that by probably everyone except for those 9 people on the court.
Yeah.
All right, now I want to play the remarks that Justice Jackson gave after her confirmation hearing. They are very powerful, and maybe by then, Jeremy would, be back with us. So if we can, let's go to that video and hear her remarks.
Thank you as well to the many, many kind-hearted people from all over this country and around the world who have reached out to me directly in recent weeks with messages of support. I have spent years toiling away in the relative solitude of my chambers with just my law clerks in isolation, so it's been somewhat overwhelming in a good way to recently be flooded with thousands of notes and cards and photos expressing just how much this moment means to so many people. The notes that I've received from children are particularly cute and especially meaningful because more than anything, they speak directly to the hope and promise of America. It has taken 232 years and 115 prior appointments for a Black woman to be selected to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. But we've made it. We've made it, all of us, all of us. And our children are telling me that they see now more than ever that here in America, anything is possible. They also tell me that I'm a role model, which I take both as an opportunity and as a huge responsibility. I am feeling up to the task primarily because I know that I am not alone. I am standing on the shoulders of my own role models, generations of Americans who never had anything close to this kind of opportunity, but who got up every day and went to work, believing in the promise of America, showing others through their determination and, yes, their perseverance that good things can be done in this great country. From my grandparents on both sides, who had only a grade school education but instilled in my parents the importance of learning, to my parents, who went to racially segregated schools growing up and were the first in their families to have the chance to go to college. I am also ever buoyed by the leadership of generations past who helped to light the way: Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Justice Thurgood Marshall, and my personal heroine, Judge Constance Baker Motley. They and so many others did the heavy lifting that made this day possible. And for all of the talk of this historic nomination and now confirmation, I think of them as the true path breakers. I am just the very lucky first inheritor of the dream of liberty and justice for all. To be sure, I have worked hard to to get to this point in my career, and I have now achieved something far beyond anything my grandparents could have possibly ever imagined. But no one does this on their own. The path was cleared for me so that I might rise to this occasion. And in the poetic words of Dr. Maya Angelou, I do so now while bringing the gifts my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave.
Wow, 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 wow. What can I say?
So powerful. So unbelievably powerful. And that last part, she is the dream and the hope of the slave.
Yeah, in fact, we're going to read that poem, that Maya Angelou poem. We're going to read that before we get off today. It has become my favorite poem. I mean, it has become my favorite poem. I don't know if Jeremy is going to be able to join us. He said he was going to go to another location and try to connect, but I don't know if it's going to happen. And I do definitely want to say a few more things about the crack cocaine disparity. It is such a huge issue. Let's read the poem first, Chloe, and then if Attorney Gordon is not back with us at that time, we'll go ahead and make some concluding remarks about the Equal Act of 21, and because we try to keep this broadcast under or around an hour.
Yes.
You want to read it, or why don't you read it?
I'm looking for it now.
I have it handy if you want me to go and read it.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can go and read it.
All right, I have it here. This is I Still Rise by Maya Angelou, Dr. Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard? 'Cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air, I still rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Now, this is my favorite part. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. That's powerful.
Wow. One of the most powerful poets, writers, authors, essayists of our history, Maya Angelou.
Absolutely. And do you know the great Maya Angelou was also friends with Malcolm X, friends of Kwame Nkrumah, Kwame Nkrumah, who was the very first president on the continent of Africa to overcome colonialism, the country of Ghana. She was a good friend of his, a good friend of Malcolm X, a good friend of Dr. King. I mean, although she started out, with a very rocky start, having been, I think, sexually molested, she still ended very powerfully, and a very committed Christian, by the way. So these words are powerful. Some parts of it, were for a woman, obviously. but the words are yet powerful, very, very powerful. Yes. So I wanted to read that before we got off. So I don't think that Jeremy is going to join us. So let's go back and just make some concluding remarks about the crack cocaine disparity. So the Equal Act, let me put it up. All right, sorry about that. So the Equal Act of 2021, if signed into law, it will completely eliminate the federal sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine. And that is so long overdue. As I said early in the broadcast, the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 reduced it from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1. But the 18 to 1 disparity is still unjust and unfair. And the reason it is because most of the crack users are black and most of the powdered cocaine users are white. So, and look, cocaine is cocaine. It's the same thing. There's chemically, as far as the physical properties are concerned, not a lot of difference. Of course, the way they cook the powder cocaine and turn it into crack makes it more potent, but it's still cocaine at the end of the day. And it should not, prosecution for crack should not disparage or create a disparity on the basis of race. All right. And so to get rid of that 18 to 1 disparity, the Equal Act has made it through the House and looks like it may make it also through the Senate. And so now we're just waiting on Chuck Schumer and the Democrats to get it on the floor and get it passed.
And I hope it does. And one of the big things too that the Equal Act does is make this 1-to-1 ratio retroactive. So people who were convicted under even the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 and then the Anti-Drug Act of 1986 could potentially have their sentences reduced. And that is huge. That is one thing that the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 didn't do, which is make it retroactive. And people who were convicted under those previous laws can now try to have their sentences reduced. This is just so big. This quote unquote war on drugs, the crack epidemic, it incarcerated so many black people, so many black men. And the fact that we have this bill now that is trying to go back and even fix it in the past is big. And I really hope that the Senate passes this so that it can become law and be signed by President Biden.
Yeah, I mean, the two things that sort of stands out, the three strikes, you're out provisions of a lot of state law, as well as the mandatory sentencing that took away discretion from the judges where crack is concerned, as you said, resulted in basically mass incarceration. And see, what happens is when the federal government enacts a law, oftentimes it ends up becoming, parts of it at least, if not the whole thing, ends up becoming state law. It's not automatically imposed on states, but a lot of times state legislatures will adopt parts of that law. And so we see the harshness on crack cocaine mirrored in many states across the country, and it caused mass incarceration to shoot through the roof. Almost 2.5 million people now in state and federal prisons, and they're disproportionately black. Now, I want to say one other thing before we move on, before we end this. With Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson becoming the first black female Supreme Court justice, it also shines light on the dearth of black female federal judges, period, in history. Only 2.4% of federal judges have been black females. Just 2.4%. And that is not congruent with the fact that 6.6% of the U.S. population is comprised of black women. So the percentage of black females on the federal judiciary should reflect the percentage of black females in the country. So I certainly wanted to point out that although we're excited about Justice Jackson being appointed to the court, we need more black females on the federal bench as well.
We definitely do. Our perspective is needed on the federal bench. So I hope that President Biden will have more opportunities to appoint black female federal judges, as well as presidents to come, because we definitely need to be on the federal judiciary a lot more and represent it more.
I think Biden has nominated more black females than most presidents. I don't know if more than Obama, but most presidents. So it looks like that is changing. And I disagree with President Biden on some issues, strongly disagree with him on some issues, but I must give it up to the guy. He kept his word about getting a black woman on the court. He has a black woman vice president. He has a black woman, I think her name is Linda Thomas, who is, I think, the UN, America's UN ambassador, I believe. He has a black woman, I think, over the budget office. He may soon have a black press secretary. A black woman, So he has, I got to give that up to him. He has really made it a very big part of his administration to promote African-American women and African-Americans, period.
Rightfully so. Keep it up, Joe. And this is a little off topic, but I did hear his press secretary say that they are leaving the option open of completely eliminating student loan debt. So if he continues to keep his promise and potentially address student loan debt right before the midterms, I think that could be great.
That would be a watershed moment.
If he does that, if he wants to change his current perception around, he needs to do that.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm so sorry. We'll get Jeremy back on because I think he has some great things that he can contribute to the discussion about federal sentencing. That's all he does. He just works in the federal courthouse. He and I used to run into each other in the state court here in Dallas County. That's how I know Jeremy. And then all of a sudden he disappeared, and I found out later he disappeared because he started working exclusively in the federal court system. So we're going to get him back on so that we can talk to him about federal sentencing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. All right, Chloe, what else do we need to say before we get off the air?
This has just been a wonderful show. We're going to keep you all updated on the Equal Act of 2020 as it makes its way through the Senate. Hopefully the Senate passes it. I think all of the Democrats support it and 11 Republican senators, which should be enough potentially to get it passed, get it in front of President Biden. But we need this done. We need to stop this disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. It has been absolutely devastating to our community for the last 3 to 4 decades. The time is now for it to change. The time is now.
And I also want to say, listen, please, I don't think there is another YouTube channel that brings you legal news from the Black perspective. Not to my knowledge. That's all we do exclusively every week. Now, there are other Black news shows, that talks about Black issues, but none legal issues exclusively. 2 Black attorneys. So share this content. Share our channel with your friends.
Share it, guys.
I mean, like it, share it, and subscribe. My wife has drilled that in my head. Like, share, and subscribe. 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 Okay? Help us get the word out. Thank you, as always, Rebels, for joining with us today and for your comments. And that is going to end our show.
Peace.
Peace.